Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. I was humbly reminded this week that not everybody speaks the same language as me. So I wanted to pop on and try to sum up a somewhat complicated piece about the central nervous system. What is regulation versus dysregulation? And I'm going to try to dilute that into simple terms, which I always appreciate when I'm watching videos or learning. And then I want to introduce you to the smoke detector analogy, which is a really great way to look at regulation versus dysregulation. So, in order to understand that, we have to understand our central nervous system. This is a vital part of our body, it is our command center. And it's made up of the brain, the spinal cord. It regulates everything from our motor control, our sensory processing, our emotional responses, and our cognitive functioning. So, proper regulation in the central nervous system allows us to maintain homeostasis, a funky word for balance. And this is when we not only feel in balance, but we feel as though we're in a stable environment. So, when we feel homeostasis, which we want to promote in our lives as much as possible, we have the ability to adapt, focus, rest, and recover most effectively. So, regulation depends on these complex interactions between neurotransmitters, which are chemical messengers, like dopamine, serotonin, GABA, glutamate. These chemicals, they help to modulate neuroactivity and maintain balance. I'm not going to talk too much more about them. I have another video on addiction in the brain, and it's just not relevant in this moment. All you have to know is that when balance is lost, the central nervous system becomes dysregulated, and this is where problems arise. Dysregulation is caused by chronic states of stress, any sort of trauma we've experienced, neurodevelopmental conditions, or even lack of sleep. Yes, this is why your therapist asks you about sleep, because when we don't have adequate and proper rest, it does create dysregulation in our system. Now, when we are dysregulated, it interrupts the balance between these neurotransmitters and how they communicate, which then increases inflammation in our brain and then impairs communication between brain regions like our prefrontal cortex and our amygdala. These are areas responsible for decision making and emotional regulation. So think about that. When we are dysregulated, which can happen very easily, it can happen when we step out onto the road and a car zooms by. There's no accident, but that can dysregulate us. It impacts our ability to think rationally, clearly, make effective decisions, and regulate our system. Over time, dysregulation can create symptoms like anxiety, depression, PTSD, ADHD, things like that. Now, the good news is we have neuroplasticity, another funky term, but it's our brain's power to change and evolve over time. So our system is highly adaptable. This is why I oftentimes tell my folks, do not get discouraged. You have neuroplasticity. Even those that come in with decades of addictive issues have the power to change and evolve. This then depends on lifestyle changes that you make, medication for some people, exercise, mindfulness, and therapy. These things and a combination of these things can help restore regulation in the central nervous system. Now, the central nervous system, it's not just about staying calm. It's actually about optimizing our brain's ability to respond, recover, and adapt to situations and information coming at us. That's why we use the term balance, because that is so important to our physical and emotional health. So the central nervous system is constantly trying to detect threats. It's constantly scanning the environments, both internal and external to us, to say what is safe and what is dangerous. Now, this process is largely unconscious and is oftentimes rooted in our survival mechanisms. So we have our sympathetic nervous state, and this is what activates fight and flight. And we have our parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes rest and digest. So oftentimes when we get dysregulated, which is oftentimes outside of our control, We need to activate our parasympathetic nervous system, which can take minutes, it can take hours, it can take a day, etc. for some people, but we ultimately need to promote rest and digest to start to go back to homeostasis. That was a lot of science. If you're still with me, here's the smoke detector analogy. This comes from Dr. Bessel van der Kolk and Dr. Daniel Siegel. And so if you imagine that your brain is like a house, and inside that house you have a smoke detector, which hopefully you all have smoke detectors. The job of the smoke detector, which is your amygdala, is to alert you when there's danger like smoke or a fire. So in a healthy, regulated nervous system, the smoke detector works properly. If you burn toast, maybe it beeps a little and you can wave the smoke away. If there's a real fire, it blares loudly and your body gets ready to fight or flee, saving your life. But someone who's experienced trauma, especially chronic or early life trauma, the smoke detector becomes extra sensitive or it even malfunctions. Now burning toast sets off the full alarm. The system can't tell the difference between a real fire and a harmless smoke from burnt toast. It overreacts, triggering a survival response like panic, shutdown, racing heart, or disassociation, which is when somebody disconnects from reality, even when there's no danger. Meanwhile, the thinking part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, which acts like the adult in the room, goes offline during these moments. So instead of saying, oh, it's just toast, you're okay, the body feels like it's a real fire and acts accordingly. So how do we fix the alarm? Do not turn your smoke detectors off. We need them. They are important. So we don't want to get rid of them, but we need to recalibrate them. So it only goes off when there's real danger, not every time something reminds us of past trauma. This is why creating safety through grounding, connection, mindfulness, therapy, trauma-informed care is essential. It helps the nervous system learn the difference between then versus now, between danger versus safety. I worked with a few folks and trying to promote more safety in the room this week. And it was interesting because they said, Ashley, I feel safe in this moment right now. And when we have moments of safety, if we can invite that safety into our system, remind ourselves, I am safe right now. In this room, in my office, I am safe. When I walk outside, when I get into my car, I am safe right now. I can create safety there. The more we can consciously promote safety in our system, that's also part of the recalibration process. I hope this was helpful. That's all for now.